The glass towers of downtown Manhattan reflected the late afternoon sun, casting golden streaks across the bustling streets below. Inside the sleek lobby of Sterling & Associates, one of New York's most prestigious investment firms, the air conditioning hummed quietly as polished executives hurried past marble columns and leather couches. Behind the reception desk sat Madison Clarke, a 26-year-old woman whose designer suit and perfectly styled blonde hair matched the building's expensive aesthetic. She'd worked at Sterling for 3 years, and in that time, she'd learned to read people the moment they walked through those revolving doors. Madison glanced at her watch. 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Almost time to start wrapping up for the weekend. She was already mentally planning her evening when the doors swung open, and a man walked in. He wore a simple gray thobe with a white keffiyeh held in place by a black agal. His beard was neatly trimmed, and he carried a worn leather briefcase that had clearly seen better days. Madison's eyes swept over him quickly, cataloging every detail with practiced efficiency. The man approached the desk with calm, measured steps. His dark eyes were gentle, almost kind, but Madison had already made her assessment. She'd seen plenty of people walk through these doors, and she knew the difference between someone who belonged here and someone who didn't. "Good afternoon," the man said, his English accented but clear. "I have an appointment with Mr. Harrison Sterling." Madison didn't even check her computer. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her expression cooling. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Sterling doesn't take walk-in appointments. If you'd like to schedule something, you'll need to go through the proper channels on our website." The man's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm not a walk-in. I called yesterday and spoke with someone. They confirmed my appointment for 4:30 today." Madison's fingers moved lazily across her keyboard, not really looking. "What's your name?" "Rashid Al-Zahrani." She pretended to scan her screen, though she barely glanced at it. "I don't see anything here. Are you sure you called the right office?" Rashid reached into his briefcase and pulled out his phone. "Yes, I'm certain. I have the confirmation email right here if you'd like to see it." Madison waved her hand dismissively. "Look, Mr. Al-Zahrani, was it? We get a lot of people coming in here claiming they have appointments. Mr. Sterling is an extremely busy man. He doesn't just meet with anyone who walks in off the street." "I understand that," Rashid said patiently. "But I did schedule this appointment properly. Perhaps if you could just call his office." Madison's jaw tightened. She was tired. It was Friday, and she didn't have time for this. "Sir, I'm telling you there's no appointment. Maybe you wrote down the wrong day, or maybe you're thinking of a different firm. Either way, Mr. Sterling isn't available." Rashid stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable. The lobby buzzed with activity around them. Phones ringing, heels clicking against marble, the soft ding of elevators. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I see. Well, thank you for your time." He turned and walked back toward the revolving doors, his worn briefcase swinging gently at his side. Madison watched him go, then immediately forgot about him as she answered an incoming call. What Madison didn't know was that Rashid Al-Zahrani walked out of that building and straight into a waiting black Mercedes S-Class. His driver, a professional man in his 50s named David, looked up from his phone. "Everything all right, sir?" Rashid settled into the leather seat and smiled slightly. "It seems there was some confusion about my appointment." David's expression darkened. "Should I call Mr. Sterling's direct line?" "No need," Rashid said, gazing out the window at the Manhattan skyline. "Let's head back to the hotel. I'll handle it tomorrow." The Mercedes pulled away from the curb, merging into the Friday evening traffic. Rashid thought about the receptionist's face, the way she'd dismissed him without even checking properly. He wasn't angry. He'd experienced worse in his life. But it reminded him of something his father used to say. The measure of a person isn't in their clothes or their car, but in how they treat those they believe can do nothing for them. Before you continue with this story, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss our next incredible tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. That evening, in his suite at the Plaza Hotel, Rashid sat in a comfortable chair by the window, looking out over Central Park. The room was elegant but understated. He'd never been one for excessive luxury, despite having more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. His phone rang, and he answered immediately when he saw the caller ID. "Harrison," Rashid said warmly. "How are you, my friend?" Harrison Sterling's voice boomed through the speaker. "Rashid, I am so sorry about today. I just got your message. My assistant had the appointment in the calendar, but somehow it never made it down to reception. That's completely unacceptable." "These things happen," Rashid said diplomatically. "Not at my firm, they don't," Harrison insisted. He'd known Rashid for 15 years, ever since they'd met at an international business conference in Dubai. Back then, Harrison had been building his investment firm, and Rashid had been one of his first major clients. More than that, they'd become genuine friends. "Listen, I'm in Tokyo right now for meetings, but I'll be back Sunday night. Can we reschedule for Monday morning, 9 o'clock? I'll personally make sure everything is ready." "Monday works perfectly," Rashid agreed. After the call ended, Rashid sat in thought for a long while. He'd come to New York to discuss a significant investment opportunity, a technology startup that Harrison's firm had been vetting. The company, NeuralSync, was developing breakthrough artificial intelligence for medical diagnostics. Rashid had been following their progress for months, and if the due diligence checked out, he was prepared to invest $200 million. But now, sitting in his hotel room, another idea was forming. An idea that had nothing to do with artificial intelligence or medical technology, and everything to do with a receptionist who'd judged a book by its cover. Saturday morning arrived, with clear blue skies. Madison woke up in her apartment in Queens, checked her Instagram. Her post from last night's dinner at an upscale Soho restaurant had gotten over 300 likes and spent the day shopping with her best friend, Jenna. They hit the boutiques in the meatpacking district, had brunch at a trendy spot in Greenwich Village, and talked about Madison's latest dating app disaster. "I'm telling you," Madison said, sipping her mimosa, "it's impossible to meet quality men anymore. Everyone who matches with me is either broke or boring." Jenna laughed. "You're too picky." "I'm selective," Madison corrected. "There's a difference. I work at one of the best investment firms in the city. I know what success looks like, and I'm not settling for less." She didn't think about Rashid Al-Zahrani at all that weekend. Why would she? He was just another person who'd tried to get past her desk without an appointment, one of dozens she'd turned away over the years. By Monday morning, she'd completely forgotten his face. Monday came in with a cold front, the kind of crisp October morning that made New York feel alive. Madison arrived at Sterling & Associates at 8:15, as she always did. She liked getting there before the rush, settling in with her coffee and checking her emails before the executives started streaming through the lobby. At 8:45, her supervisor, Patricia Gaines, came down from the executive floor. Patricia was in her early 50s, a no-nonsense woman who'd been with the firm for 20 years and had worked her way up from reception to director of operations. "Madison, I need to speak with you," Patricia said, her tone serious. Madison's stomach tightened. Had she done something wrong? "Of course. What's going on?" "Harrison Sterling is coming in at 9 o'clock with an extremely important client. This is one of our biggest potential investors, and Mr. Sterling has made it very clear that everything needs to be perfect. When this gentleman arrives, you are to treat him with the absolute highest level of service. Call up to Harrison's office immediately. Offer him our best coffee. Make him feel welcome. Do you understand?" "Absolutely," Madison said, relieved it was just standard VIP protocol. "What's the client's name?" "Rashid Al-Zahrani." The name meant nothing to Madison. She'd already forgotten their interaction from Friday. At 8:55, Harrison Sterling himself came down to the lobby. This was unusual. Harrison rarely came down from the executive floor except for the most important meetings. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. "Morning, Madison," he said, his tone warm but professional. "Mr. Al-Zahrani should be here any moment. When he arrives, please call my office immediately and escort him up personally." "Of course, Mr. Sterling." Harrison glanced at his watch, then toward the revolving doors. "Actually, I'll wait here. I want to greet him personally." Madison had never seen Harrison wait in the lobby for anyone. Whoever this Al-Zahrani was, he must be incredibly important. At exactly 9 o'clock, the revolving doors turned, and Rashid Al-Zahrani walked in. This time, he wasn't wearing a thobe. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit that Madison's trained eye immediately recognized as Brioni, easily $5,000. His tie was understated but elegant, and the watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Madison's annual salary. But it was his face that made Madison's blood run cold. She recognized him instantly. The kind eyes, the neatly trimmed beard, the man she'd turned away on Friday. Harrison's face lit up. "Rashid!" He strode forward with his hand extended. "It's wonderful to see you, my friend. How was your weekend?" "Excellent. Thank you, Harrison," Rashid replied, shaking his hand warmly. "The city is beautiful this time of year." They embraced briefly, in the way old friends do, and then Harrison turned toward the desk. "Madison, this is Mr. Rashid Al-Zahrani, one of our most valued clients." Madison felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. Her face went pale, and she managed to stand up, though her legs felt weak. "Mr. Al-Zahrani," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's a pleasure to meet you." Rashid looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was no anger in his expression, No smugness, just a quiet acknowledgement. "We've actually met before," he said gently. "Friday afternoon." Harrison's expression shifted. "Friday?" But that was when he stopped, realization dawning on his face. He turned to Madison, and she could see the fury building behind his professional facade. "You were here Friday afternoon." Yes, I was," Madison stammered. "There was a confusion about—" "We'll discuss this later," Harrison cut her off, his voice ice-cold. Then he turned back to Rashid, his warmth returning instantly. "I am profoundly sorry, Rashid. This is unacceptable." "Please, Harrison," Rashid said, raising a hand. "It was a simple misunderstanding. Let's not make a big issue of it." But Madison could see it in Harrison's eyes. This wasn't over. The two men headed toward the elevators, and Harrison's assistant, Margaret, appeared to escort them up. As they walked away, Madison heard Harrison say to Rashid, "I promise you, we will address this situation immediately." Madison sank back into her chair, her hands trembling. Around her, other staff members who'd witnessed the exchange were exchanging glances, some sympathetic, others curious. Madison felt exposed, humiliated. She'd dismissed one of their biggest clients without even checking properly. She'd judged him based on his appearance and made assumptions that were completely wrong. Patricia appeared at her desk 20 minutes later. "Madison, come with me, please." They went to a small conference room on the second floor. Patricia closed the door and sat down across from Madison, her expression grave. "Do you want to tell me what happened on Friday?" Patricia asked. Madison's throat was tight. "A man came in saying he had an appointment with Mr. Sterling. He was dressed in traditional clothing and his briefcase was old, and I just assumed I didn't check the calendar properly. I told him there was no appointment and turned him away." Patricia closed her eyes briefly, as if processing something painful. "Do you have any idea who Rashid Al-Zahrani is?" "No," Madison whispered. "He's a Saudi businessman and investor. His net worth is estimated at over $3 billion. He's been a client of this firm for 15 years, and he's one of Harrison Sterling's closest personal friends. He's invested hundreds of millions of dollars through us." Patricia paused, letting that sink in. "And you dismissed him because of how he was dressed?" Madison felt tears threatening. "I made a terrible mistake." "Yes, you did," Patricia said bluntly. "But it's worse than that, Madison. This isn't just about a missed appointment. It's about judgment. It's about the values this firm represents. We treat every person who walks through that door with respect, whether they're wearing a thobe or a three-piece suit, whether they're a billionaire or a delivery person. That's not just policy. That's basic human decency." "I know," Madison said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry," Patricia sighed. "Harrison wants to terminate your employment immediately. However, Mr. Al-Zahrani asked him to reconsider. He said he didn't want your career ruined over one mistake." Madison looked up, stunned. What? "He advocated for you," Patricia said. "Even after how you treated him, he asked Harrison to give you another chance. So here's what's going to happen. You're being suspended for 1 week without pay. During that time, you're going to think very carefully about your actions and whether this is really the career for you. When you come back, you'll be on probation for 3 months. One more incident like this and you're done. Do you understand?" "Yes," Madison said, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. And please tell Mr. Al-Zahrani that I'm sorry." "You can tell him yourself," Patricia said, standing up. "He's asked to speak with you before he leaves today." An hour later, Madison was called up to the executive floor. She'd never been up here before. It was reserved for senior partners and their most important clients. The offices were even more impressive than the lobby, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and art that probably cost more than her parents' house. Margaret led her to a small private meeting room. Rashid was sitting by the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He turned when she entered and gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit down," he said kindly. Madison sat, her hands folded in her lap. "Mr. Al-Zahrani, I want to apologize for how I treated you on Friday. There's no excuse for my behavior. I made assumptions based on your appearance, and I didn't do my job properly. I'm truly sorry." Rashid studied her for a moment. "Why do you think you made those assumptions?" The question caught her off guard. She'd expected anger, maybe a lecture, but not this. I don't know. I see so many people every day, and I guess I've learned to categorize them, to make quick judgments about who's important and who's not." "Based on what?" Rashid asked gently. "Their clothes? Their briefcase? The way they speak?" Madison felt shame wash over her. "Yes, I'm not proud of it." Rashid nodded slowly. "Can I tell you a story?" "Of course." "When I was 22 years old, I was working in a small shop in Riyadh that my father owned. We sold textiles. Nothing fancy. Just everyday fabrics for regular people. One day, an American businessman came in. He was wearing an expensive suit, spoke confidently, and looked very important. He wanted to buy fabric for his hotel's renovation, and he promised us it would be a huge order, the biggest we'd ever seen. My father was cautious, but I convinced him to trust this man, to give him credit. The man took our best fabrics and disappeared. We never saw him again, and the loss nearly destroyed our business. Madison listened, captivated. My father could have been angry with me, Rashid continued, but instead he sat me down and said something I've never forgotten. He said, "Son, you judge that man by his expensive suit and his confident words, but character isn't worn on the outside. The richest person might dress simply, and the poorest person might carry themselves with dignity. Never judge a book by its cover, because you'll miss the truly valuable stories inside." Rashid leaned forward slightly. I built my business by learning that lesson. Some of my most successful investments came from people others overlooked. Some of my closest friends are people who others dismissed because they didn't look the part. And the biggest mistakes I've seen in business come from people making snap judgments based on appearances. I understand, Madison said quietly, and I promise you, I'll never make that mistake again. I believe you, Rashid said. That's why I asked Harrison to give you another chance. Everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow from their mistakes. But Madison, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you become a receptionist at an investment firm? Madison blinked, surprised by the question. It was supposed to be temporary. I studied business administration at NYU. I wanted to work my way up, learn the industry from the ground level. But 3 years have passed, and I'm still at that desk. And why do you think that is? She thought about it. I guess I got comfortable. It pays well enough, and I know the job. Moving up would mean taking risks, proving myself all over again. Rashid smiled. You know, the receptionist position is one of the most important in any company. You're the first person people meet. You set the tone for every interaction, but it sounds like you're capable of more. I'd like to think so, Madison said. Then perhaps this experience is an opportunity, Rashid said. Not just to correct a mistake, but to think about who you want to be, not just as an employee, but as a person. He stood up, and Madison did the same. Thank you for hearing me out, Mr. Al-Zahrani, and thank you for giving me a second chance. I won't waste it. Rashid extended his hand and they shook. I believe you won't. Good luck, Madison. As Madison rode the elevator back down to the lobby to collect her things before her suspension began, she felt something shifting inside her. Shame, yes, but also something else. A kind of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She thought about how she'd been living her life, judging people by their Instagram-worthy surfaces, choosing restaurants and clothes and even potential boyfriends based on appearances and status symbols. She'd been doing exactly what she'd done to Rashid, making quick judgments based on superficial criteria. When was the last time she'd looked deeper? When was the last time she'd given someone a chance to surprise her? Over the next week, Madison did a lot of thinking. She stayed off social media, spent time with her parents in Connecticut, and read books she'd been meaning to get to for years. She thought about what Rashid had said about opportunity and growth. She also did some research on Rashid Al-Zahrani. What she found amazed her. Yes, he was a billionaire, but his wealth had been built on smart investments and hard work, starting from his family's small textile business. He'd survived the loss of his father at a young age, put himself through university, and built his fortune through careful strategy and genuine relationships. But what impressed her most were the articles about his philanthropy. He'd built schools in rural Saudi Arabia. He funded scholarship programs for underprivileged students around the world. He donated millions to medical research and disaster relief. And in every interview she found, he spoke about the same themes: dignity, respect, and looking beyond surfaces to see people's true value. This was the man she'd dismissed as unimportant. When Madison returned to work the following Monday, she approached her job differently. She greeted every person who came through those doors with genuine warmth and respect. The delivery drivers, the maintenance workers, the executives, everyone. She checked every appointment thoroughly, no matter who was asking. She started paying attention to people as individuals rather than as categories, and something unexpected happened. People noticed. Patricia commented on the change. Other employees smiled at her more. Even Harrison Sterling, on one of his rare trips through the lobby, stopped to tell her she was doing excellent work. 3 weeks after Madison returned from suspension, Patricia called her into her office again. Madison's heart sank. Had she done something wrong again? But Patricia was smiling. Sit down, Madison. I have some interesting news. Madison sat, nervous. We have an opening in our client relations department, Patricia said. It's an assistant position, working directly with our major investors to ensure their needs are met. It would mean leaving reception, but it's a step up. More responsibility, better pay, and real opportunity for advancement. I'd like to recommend you for the position." Madison's eyes widened. "Really? After everything that happened?" "Because of everything that happened," Patricia corrected. "Madison, the person you were 3 weeks ago wouldn't have been ready for this role. But the person you've become, the way you've reflected and grown from your mistake, that's exactly what we need in client relations. Someone who understands that our clients are people first, investments second." Madison felt tears welling up. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll interview for it," Patricia smiled. "I can't promise you'll get it. There are other candidates. But you deserve the chance to try." The interview process was rigorous. Madison met with department heads, presented case studies, and had to demonstrate her understanding of client relations. But throughout it all, she thought about Rashid's words. Character isn't worn on the outside. She got the job. 6 months later, Madison was thriving in her new role. She worked with clients from around the world, helping them navigate their investments and building genuine relationships. She discovered that she was good at this, really good. She could connect with people, understand their needs, and help them feel valued. One Tuesday morning in April, Margaret from the executive floor called down to Madison's new office. "Madison, Mr. Sterling would like to see you in conference room A. He has someone he'd like you to meet." Madison grabbed her tablet and headed up. When she entered the conference room, Harrison was there with Rashid Al-Zahrani. It had been 6 months since they'd last seen each other, and Madison felt a mix of nervousness and gratitude. "Mr. Al-Zahrani," she said, smiling warmly, "it's wonderful to see you again." "Madison," Rashid said, standing to shake her hand. "Harrison's been telling me about your move to client relations. Congratulations." "Thank you. And thank you again for everything." Harrison gestured for them all to sit. "Rashid is here to discuss his investment in NeuralSync, the AI medical diagnostics company. The deal is moving forward, and we need someone from our team to serve as his primary point of contact throughout the process. Given the complexity and the amount involved, I need someone detail-oriented, diplomatic, and trustworthy." He looked at Madison. "I'd like it to be you." Madison felt her heart race. This was huge, the kind of account that could make her career. "I would be honored," Rashid smiled. "I requested you specifically, actually. Harrison told me about the work you've been doing, and I think you're the right person for this." Over the next 4 months, Madison worked closely with Rashid on the NeuralSync investment. It was challenging, complex, and absolutely fascinating. She learned about due diligence, negotiation strategies, and the intricacies of venture capital. But more than that, she got to know Rashid as a person. They had lunch meetings where he'd tell her about his business philosophy, his family back in Saudi Arabia, his hopes for the future. He asked about her life, her dreams, her goals. He became not just a client, but a mentor. One day, over coffee in a cafe near the office, Rashid asked her, "Do you remember what I asked you when we spoke after that incident? About why you became a receptionist?" "I do," Madison said. "You asked me why I was still there after 3 years, and you said you'd gotten comfortable," Rashid reminded her. "That moving up would mean taking risks. So let me ask you something else. Now that you've taken those risks, how does it feel?" Madison thought about it. "Terrifying sometimes, but also alive. Like I'm finally becoming who I'm supposed to be." Rashid nodded approvingly. "That's growth. And growth is always uncomfortable before it's beautiful." The NeuralSync deal closed in August. Rashid's $200 million investment was officially complete, and the company's founders were over the moon. Sterling and Associates threw a small celebration, and Harrison publicly recognized Madison's contributions to making the deal happen smoothly. At the celebration, Rashid pulled Madison aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a letter of recommendation, written by Rashid himself, detailing her professionalism, growth, and potential. It was the kind of recommendation that could open doors anywhere in the financial world. "I don't understand," Madison said, overwhelmed. "You've grown tremendously in the past year," Rashid said. "You'll continue to grow here at Sterling, but eventually you might want to explore other opportunities. When that time comes, I want you to have this. And Madison, I want you to remember something. The best investment I ever made wasn't in a company or a property. It was in people, in giving them chances, believing in their potential, and watching them surprise themselves." Madison felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Rashid, for everything, for giving me a second chance, for believing in me, for teaching me what really matters. You taught yourself," Rashid said kindly. "I just gave you the opportunity to learn." 2 years after that fateful Friday afternoon, Madison sat in her own office at Sterling and Associates. She was now a junior partner in the Client Relations Department, one of the youngest in the firm's history. She had clients around the world, handled multi-million-dollar accounts, and was known throughout the company for her integrity and her ability to connect with people from all backgrounds. On her desk was a framed photo from the NeuralSync celebration, showing her standing with Rashid and Harrison. Next to it was a small plaque with a quote she'd had made. "Character isn't worn on the outside. Never judge a book by its cover, because you'll miss the truly valuable stories inside." She thought about that Friday afternoon often, how close she'd come to missing the most important lesson of her life, how one moment of poor judgment had become the catalyst for complete transformation. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Rashid, who was back in Riyadh. "Saw your name in the WSJ article about emerging leaders in finance. Your father would be proud." "I certainly am." Madison smiled and typed back, "Thank you, and thank you for seeing past my worst moment to my potential. I'll never forget it." As the Manhattan sun set outside her window, casting orange light across her office, Madison reflected on how much her life had changed. Not just her career, but her whole perspective. She no longer judged people by their clothes or their cars or their Instagram posts. She looked deeper, gave people chances, believed in potential rather than appearances, and all because one billionaire, dismissed by a receptionist who should have known better, chose grace over anger, education over revenge, and possibility over punishment. The biggest surprise hadn't been that Rashid came back the next day. The biggest surprise had been what he'd given her. Not consequences, but a chance to become someone better. And that gift, Madison knew, was worth more than any investment she'd ever manage. Outside her office, the city buzzed with millions of stories. Millions of people making assumptions and judgments about each other every day. But Madison had learned her lesson. She knew now that the most valuable people in the world might walk through your door wearing anything, carrying anything, looking like anyone. And it was her job, no, her privilege, to treat every single one of them with the dignity they deserved. Because that, she'd learned, was what separated good business from great business, and what separated good people from exceptional ones. Not the clothes they wore or the money they had, but how they treated others when it mattered most. And in that moment, Madison understood that the real investment Rashid had made wasn't in NeuralSync or any company. It was in her, in who she could become if someone just believed in her potential and gave her the chance to grow. That was the surprise he'd brought back the next day. Not revenge, not anger, but grace, and it had changed everything.